Hello, I'm Gary Hines for the SGA and the SGA Network and your host for today's program. Our program format is a new style format with various reports from our SGA operating conference and exhibits in Fort Worth, Texas. Had over 700 attendees. We took over downtown Fort Worth for almost a week, caused the city to go into a blackout, survived 200-degree Texas temperatures, and, well, you kind of get the picture. This conference, like many other SGA events, allows those in the natural gas industry to come together and share ideas, information, and for individuals to network with one another. Our 2012 Chairman's theme is promoting partnership, innovation, and employee excellence, and we think this conference certainly encompasses all three of these, and hopefully you'll get a sense of that throughout today's program. The program is broken into 5 segments, which should allow you to view all the segments or, as you deem appropriate, individual segments for your own personal needs. Our program will include segments on, first, damage prevention and public awareness as it takes a new and different twist in the industry. Our second segment will be on transmission integrity management and what we call the trust factor. Our third segment will be on industry trends and technologies. Fourth, we'll cover distribution integrity management. And our fifth and final segment will be on new collaborative efforts in the industry. We have many regulatory issues affecting the industry now, and during the operating conference we had the opportunity to take a closer look at the question of trust in our industry from the public perception. In the second segment, Keith Leewis with P-Pic, one of our industry experts, had a chance to speak with Larry Hjalmarson with Williams about the SGA Transmission Operations and Engineering section and how they're working together to build trust. Keith?
Hey, thank you, Gary. And so we've got Larry Hjalmarson here this morning, and he was just in the transmission section, and we were talking about trust and building trust as well. So I was going to ask you if you could quickly summarize some of the things that the Integrity Management Continuous Improvement Group at INGAA are doing in order to build trust with the neighbors next to our pipeline and with the other folks that represent them, like regulators.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be glad to, Keith. I think so much of this is around trust. Do we trust ourselves within our own companies that we can really keep this pipeline safe? Can we really achieve zero failure? John Breslin spoke to us about a year ago at a workshop on emergency response. John Breslin is on the board of the Chemical Safety Board. They investigate accidents in facilities like refineries and chemical manufacturing plants. He has a long background in chemical manufacturing. He told us this. He said, "I know that the public has lost confidence in the natural gas industry." He said the way to restore public confidence or trust is keep your product in the pipeline. Pretty simple statement. And then he went on immediately in his next sentence and he said, you must have an outstanding integrity management program. The public does doubt us. PHMSA doubts us. Congress doubts us. I think internally sometimes we doubt ourselves. When we see failures or leaks, we might get the feeling that we can't get there. But as we examine integrity management at its fullness, where we tackle every threat on the pipeline and we find ways to mitigate that threat, we start to realize that we can prevent that. I had a coworker, a district manager, when we were handling a very tough problem. It was pre-1970 ERW pipe. It was a long seam that we knew hadn't been leaking before, but now was leaking. That was a tremendous hazard to our pipeline there. And we began working to mitigate that hazard. We didn't have an EMAT tool available yet, so we did a hydrostatic pressure test. Ran an EMAT tool later. We were doing all kinds of things to ensure the safety of that pipeline. And he had a conversation with me one day, and he said, "Larry, can I move my desk to the other end of the building?" And I said, "Well, why do you want to do that?" He said, "My office is actually close to that pipeline. That pipe is 15 feet outside of my office." Now, tongue-in-cheek, I said, "Well, where are the office administrators? They're more difficult to replace." And then he said, tongue-in-cheek, but Cheryl loves me. That's his wife. And I said, well, okay, on Cheryl's behalf, we'll move your desk. And then I rethought and I said, no, actually, Tom, I want you to move your desk out on top of that pipeline. I want you to chain yourself to that pipeline like Ahab to the white whale. Now I want you to manage the integrity of that pipe. You know, DuPont, 250 years ago, and DuPont is renowned for their safety effort. They were having, and their roots are in gunpowder manufacturing, and they were having gunpowder plants blow up. They made a simple rule. They put the plant manager's home and family on the property of the gunpowder plant, and the safety improved. I think every one of our integrity management people in the company, maybe every pipeline employee, ought to have their house next to a pipeline. That's how the public looks at us. They don't look at us like they want us to prevent some failures. They want us to prevent every failure. That's the way PHMSA looks at us. That's the way the National Transportation Safety Board looks at us. We've got to prevent them all. It is a matter of trust. As we steadily have less and less failures on our pipeline, that most of all will help build trust. And then secondly, around integrity management principles, these things are working. Though our companies that are doing this, we are seeing that we are getting better and better at this. So it really comes down to those types of conversations, proving to ourselves, first of all, that we can keep it safe, and then proving to the public, to the regulator, and to everybody else involved.
So we actually need to be safe enough to have our kids and grandkids
That's
live
right.
next
That's
to the
right.
pipeline.
And in your case, you just told me a minute ago that your daughter lives within the potential impact radius of a natural gas pipeline. So you are already there. You would qualify as a person that could work in the pipeline integrity
So
effort.
I have some trust already.
You have the requisite of skin in the game, as you described to me.
Well, thank you very much, Larry, for doing this.
Very welcome.
And
Yeah,
I'm
thanks,
going
Keith.
to turn this back to Gary. Thank you, Gary, for allowing this.
Thanks, Keith. As Larry said, building trust is a very important element with our industry and one that we should always be asking ourselves in all that we do, no matter what part of the pipeline system we work on or what we support. We need to build trust with the public, regulators, and also with emergency officials at a time of crisis. So how do we do this with emergency officials in a time that our industry is rebuilding its trust following pipeline incidents over the last couple of years? Nicole Riley caught up with Glen Boatwright of Nixon Associates to cover crisis communications and working with public and the emergency officials. Nicole?
I'm here with Glen Boatwright of Nixon Associates. He just finished a presentation about crisis communications. If you could you talk a little bit about crisis communications in the natural gas industry and where we're at today?
Sure, Nicole, thanks. Crisis communications is a very important aspect of emergency response. A lot of companies, unfortunately, don't focus on crisis communications till it's a real issue for them. We advocate, especially for those companies that are aggressive with their emergency planning, that they have a process in place to address not only the operational response to an emergency, how they're going to isolate a pipeline that may have ruptured, but the crisis communications aspects of dealing with the news media, how to handle inquiries from the public. Some key things to keep in mind are ensuring that you have a plan for how to handle crisis communications, making sure that you have boilerplate or prepared media statements, that you have things that can be advocated or things that can be conveyed to employees that they can use for initial interaction with the media. Things like we've activated our emergency response plan. Our employees are well trained to handle this type of event. Safety is our top priority. Those kinds of statements that can be used to initially hand off the news media to a company spokesperson. Another thing that fairly new that companies need to address is social media and the impact social media is having now on incidents. Everybody that has a smartphone is a potential reporter. Making sure that those aspects of social media, Facebook, YouTube, or Facebook, the YouTube video, Twitter tweets, all those things are being addressed, not necessarily individually during an emergency, but the companies have their finger on the pulse of what's actually being said about their response on their behalf from the public.
Could you give us a few pointers for anyone who may not have been in the session today about possibly how field level personnel might be able to deal with the media in a crisis situation?
Sure. As it relates to the prepared statement, we've been involved in mock emergency drills that we conduct, and we've seen some situations where it's taken a company 3 hours to generate an initial press statement that's handed to that first responder in the field that's faced with dealing with the news media, and that's just too long. We advocate that companies put together boilerplate types of press statements that are fill in the blank. That basically all you'd have to add is the location, and date, and time that's been pre-approved by the legal staff and corporate communications that can be generated quickly to give to an individual that's going to serve in the field to generate that statement to the news media. Just very important to arm them as early as you can as to what the company's doing proactively to respond to the emergency. You can't really say anything good about what's occurred, but you can say some good things about what the company's doing about the response.
Could you tell us a little bit about what mock drills are like and some of the key elements when Nixon Associates goes into a company and prepares them for a crisis situation?
Sure, Nicole. We advocate companies doing mock drills that have an outside looking in focus. A lot of companies that do mock emergency drills focus on solely the operational response. How long does it take us to isolate that pipeline segment? Where are the valves? Do our employees know where the valves are? I would offer that's things they should know and do it during their day-to-day O&M work. What we like to see companies focus on are how do they field calls from regulatory officials, political officials, those that are going to be inquiring externally of the company. How do they handle crisis communications? How well are their employees trained on how to interact with public sector responders, the incident commander that's going to be in the field? All of those external things that you have to deal with as effectively as you deal with the operational response. A lot of times companies get focused on just that operational response, and all of that external, those external inputs matter just as much as the company's response operation to the event.
Absolutely. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. Back to you, Gary.
Well, that wraps up our reports from the operating conference this year. Many thanks to the roving reporters to create this SGA e-news update, and thanks also to those willing to give us their feedback. We trust this program was successful in bringing you just a sneak peek of some of the activities at this year's conference, and hope to bring you more programs of this format in the future. For the SGA and the SGA Network, I'm Gary Hines. Join us back here next time for another program for linking people, ideas, and information through the use of technology. And thanks for watching.